Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting a hunting horror from Mansions of Madness. Hey everyone, Matty from the Plastic Canvas and welcome to another one of our Mansions of Madness painting videos. Mansions of Madness is a co-op exploration game where players take on the role of paranormal investigators and go to different locations to try and work out what's going on after some strange events. Really cool game, absolutely love it. Very thematic, horror theme, sort of Lovecraftian Cthulhu type theme, and there's a really good app that goes along with it just to help tell the story of the scenario that you're playing, and keeping track of all the stats of different the playable characters, hit points that they've taken, and the hit points of the enemies, and those sorts of things like that. So really streamlines it. But of course, being paranormal investigators, bit of a horror theme, there's got to be some bad guys to go up against, and here's one of them. This is a hunting horror. So a bit of a snake-like creature with some wings, and as you can see from the base, there's some little spots here for parts of the card that get slid. That get slid into the base to come through. These numbers are referred to in the game, and yeah, once it's in there, it's really hard to take out. So I can't get it out of there. But there is some artwork on the card there. Just bringing one in from another character, a crawling one, which I'll be painting as well. So there's some artwork going on there. Not great for using as something to work off for painting. Gives you a bit of an idea of what sort of colours there might be. Lots of them have like a lot of brown, so I'm not strictly sticking to the artwork within the game because I don't want a board just full of brown. So I'm going to be adding a little bit of extra interest. But for the hunting horror, it says black and ropey and relentless. The creature flies swiftly, always seeking its quarry. Its ever-changing form is hard to see for mortal eyes. So it can pass through impassable borders. So it's one of those ones that can, you can set up your defenses, but it can get through. So it hasn't been primed yet. It's been glued down to the base. Back when we got the game, which was a while ago now, and it was well before I'd started painting minis or had even thought about painting them, we glued them all down onto the bases so that they didn't need to be sort of put together each time we played the game. So I'll be painting him on the base, so he's already there in place. So first step's going to be priming. Using my brush on primer. If you're wondering why I use a brush on as opposed to a spray on, check out some of the earlier videos in the Zombie 15 series, particularly the Siphon video, I think episode 1, where I go into it a little bit there about why I use a brush on as opposed to a spray on. Won't be sticking with it, but it just gives you a bit of an idea of why I'm using it. So that's going to be the first step. Then that'll need to go off for about 24 hours or so, and then I'll come back and talk in the next part of the video about how I'm going to paint up our hunting horror. So going to get to priming. Then at the start of the next bit, I'll talk about what I'm going to do. So just quickly, I'm not familiar with exactly what all the different brush-on primers are actually like, because the one that I've got is not... mental black, not actually one for, strictly speaking, for minis. It's just one that I picked up from an art shop back when I first started painting, and it's for a range of materials, plastic being one of them. Straight out of the pot, it is quite thick, so I've heavily thinned it down. So just with my palette there, you see I've thinned it down to the consistency that a base coat would would normally be. So yeah, lots of water in there, just to help it go on smooth, so that it won't fill in any details. Like along the wings here on the hunting horror, there's little not scratches or gouges, but just there's texture in the wings, I suppose, and I don't want it filling in that and taking away the detail. So yeah, so it still goes on like a normal coat, but yeah, quite heavily thinned down. But if you're using a brush-on primer from like Vallejo, or I think Reaper might make one. I'm sure lots of different ones make them. You might not need to do that so much, but yeah, I need to do that with mine. Alright, so Hunting Horror's primed there. Just at the end there were a couple of spots where I noticed that I'd put the prime on a little bit thick, and so all I did was just with some paper towel, just wiped off the primer that I had in the bristles, and then kind of like if you're putting a wash on a Mini and it's pulled a little bit, yeah, going back with just with the brush and just picking up the paint that's fallen into those, where too much has fallen into a recess, and I just don't want any of those details to be taken away. So yeah, so he's primed. Actually, I need to just touch up a little bit just inside his mouth. Cool. All right, that's just taking care of that. So yeah, so he's going to go off now for 24 hours so that it can dry really, really well. If you're new to the hobby and wondering about whether you do need to prime or not, to my understanding, the paint that you use as your base coat isn't designed to stick to plastic. It's designed to stick to other paint, and so if you paint it straight onto a Mini, one like this, which is, you know, obviously made of plastic, it's not going to adhere properly, and then it can easily chip off, whereas the primer is made specifically to stick to plastic. So your primer bonds to the plastic, and then the paint that then goes over the top bonds to the primer. So yeah, if you don't want your paint chipping off, to my understanding, you definitely do need to do it. But yeah, it also just works as a good base, because we'll be using some darker colours with this guy. Starting off with the black primer will just help keep those tones dark. Whereas if you're using lighter tones, yellows, oranges, those sorts of things, than a white primer, or at least a grey is can be better. But I've only got one primer at the moment, so yeah. So he'll have some time to dry, go off properly, and then we'll come back and we'll get into base coating our Hunting Horror. Alright, so our Hunting Horror is primed and ready to go. So we're going to get on to doing a base coat now. So as I mentioned in the at the start of the last bit of the video, with this card that sits in the base, it has some artwork to show what the creatures look like. I can't actually take this one out, so I can't show you, but I think the artwork for this just shows basically just all grey, and one thing that I'm not like super thrilled with in terms of the artwork in this game is how sort of monochrome a lot of it is. So like this guy's all brown, this guy's all grey, some of them are all brown, and it seems to be there's a lot of similarities in terms of that, and when they're out on the board I'd like there to be a little bit more visual interest. So what I'm thinking I might do with this guy is do green that will run, bring it back in, green that will run across the top of the body, and as it then sort of as the tail sort of coils around here, will then turn into the bottom, but the underside of the belly will be brown, and then I'm going to blend them together where they meet, running around the edge. So yeah, green around the top half of the body, and then brown around the bottom side. And I'm thinking I might, haven't decided on the colour yet, but as the green runs out along the wings, I might blend them towards the tip into maybe like a purple or something like that. That might look a bit cool. And then with these fleshy parts of the wings, I'm thinking I might do some more wet blending in there, where it might start as almost, if I just bring it a bit closer so you can sort of see, there's a bit of a line that just runs along there, around the edge of the wing. I might start almost black there and then blend it out to a light grey at the tip, which will then run around this side, and then there's a couple of details in there that I'll just sort of just pick out with some basic edge highlighting. Anyway, so that's the concept that I'm thinking of. So I'm just basically going to wet blend some greener along the top of the body into some brown on the underside, and then I'm thinking probably purple at the moment out to the tips of the wings. So because I'm going to be doing some wet blending, I've put some drying retarder into my green and brown paint, and that's also not only going to extend the workable life of the paint so that I can blend them together, but also it's sort of acting as a bit of a thinning agent, so I won't need as much water as usual. So so we'll get him base coated and see how that looks. See if it actually works. And just quickly, I do have something planned to do with the base. I'm going to be repainting over the base up to right up to the body, so I'm not worrying about slopping any paint onto the base, because I'll just be going over the top of that with something else a little bit later. Now when I'm wet blending with something like this, where it's going to be like one colour running the whole way along and then another colour underneath, and it's just going to be that blend running all the way around, I found for myself just an easy way to do that is to kind of do it in sections. So rather than paint the green all the way around and then go with the brown, just kind of work in sections. So I've sort of painted about that much of the green, and now I'm going to go to the brown, paint that, paint the brown underneath, and then just do that blend to run around. Oh, and also I've got sort of three kind of pools of paints going on. I've got a green, a brown, and then I've also, well actually if I just bring it in, so I've got the green, the brown, and then I've got an in-between one, so that as I'm blending, if I need a bit more of a transitional tone, I've got that mix already ready to go, so that I'm not kind of brute forcing the brown to blend into the green. I can ease it in a little bit with that in-between. So got a bit of a blend happening there. I thought I'd just stop at this point because I've got kind of a light and a dark colour. The green of these two, the green's a light colour, the brown's a dark colour. I always find it easier to blend the lighter colour into the darker colour, just because it doesn't overpower, the light colour doesn't overpower the dark one as much. So if I tried to blend the brown into the green, it would blend further into the green before that transition ended than the green going into the brown. So anytime if I've got a situation like this where I'm blending one into the other, it's the lighter into the darker. sort of the main part of the body done. Pretty happy with how that's looking. I'm happy with the blend that I got from sort of the belly through to the top. Yeah, so now I'm going to do the top of the wings. So I'm going to do basically the same thing that I did there, but with a dark grey or sort of towards a black along this edge of the wing, out to a light grey along here. And the reason I'm doing that step now is because I'm going to paint the I don't know, the non-fleshy parts of the wing. I'll paint them last, so that because they're over the top of the fleshy part. So rather than trying to paint the fleshy part in between the rib bits, yeah, going to do them now, and then I can work that blend right the way along the length of the wing, and have that transition looking right from this end all the way to this end, rather than painting them as 3 separate sections, because I've already done these ribs. So yeah, so that'll be the next step. Alright, so just for doing this, I've got a dot of black, a dot of grey, and a dot of white. Tiny drop of drying retarder in each, just to let me keep blending away for a while. And yeah, I'll just sort of work in. I don't have any transitional tones at the moment. I'll see if I need to do those in between ones. But yeah, so we'll see how we go. Just trying to get a bit of an edge highlight along this edge of the wing. Just to do that, rather than painting from the top of the wing and trying to catch the edge, which is going to spread the bristles out and not give a fine edge. I'm using basically the side of the bristles, turning the wing on an angle, and then running not the tip but the side of the bristle along the edge, so that it's only catching the edge rather than rolling around over the top and then going where I don't want it to. Yeah, so there we go. So it just gives that sharper edge. Oh, and just got a little bit too sharp of a line there, so it's going to blend that out a little bit more. Alright, so happy with that on that wing. So now it's going to do the same process on the other wing. Another really good thing about wet blending is it's quite a quick process. Like once I've done this wing, I've then just got to do like those ribs, which are going to take about a minute or two. And so far I've been painting for 20-25 minutes, and the base coat's nearly done. And yeah, looking pretty good. So it's quite a quick process. A good way to, if there are going to be blends within your base coat, it's a good way to go about it, because yeah, you can push through it quite quickly. So there's a base coat done on the Hunting Horror, and by doing some wet blending got through it pretty quick. That's probably including the wings there, maybe 35 to 40 minutes maybe of painting. So you can push through it pretty quick. Obviously I still need to do inside the mouth, but that's going to be a finishing touch. So while I was painting the wings, and I still actually need to do the underside of the wings there, forgot about them, but I won't do any blending in there. They'll just be straight colours, so that'll be an easy fix. While I was doing the wings, the body's dried, so I'm going to do a wash over that just because there are some details in here. There's sort of some scaly, if it'll focus, it might have better pick up. There are some scaly sort of things in there, so just going to do a green wash over the top, blend it into a brown wash underneath just to bring out some of those details, and then I'm just going to do a little bit of highlighting just up on top of the ridges just to pick them out a little bit. And then our Hunting Horror will be just about done, including, of course, doing the underside of the wings there, which I totally forgot about. So I might go ahead and do the underside of them, and then I'll do a green wash along the top, brown over the brown, and then sort of blend them together just to pick out some of those details a little bit more, so I don't need to go through and actually paint those lines of the scales to bring them out. Just a quick way of doing that. So those two washes that I put on before, the green and the brown, they've had plenty of time to dry, and they've sort of blended together quite nicely, so I've got a good sort of smooth transition going on from the top through to the belly. So happy with how that's looking. Just get rid of whatever that is. Anyway. Sorry. So now that that's done, I'm going to do some highlighting, and I'm thinking because of the texture that's in the body with these scales, I might just do some simple dry brushing that's just going to pick up sort of the top here, run down the back, pick up the top of the head, those sorts of spots where most of the light's going to be hitting. Sorry. So the way that I'm going to do that is start off with just a slightly lighter green than what the base coat is. Hit, pretty well everywhere that light's going to be hitting. And then mix in a little bit of white and then go over it again, but not quite as far. So just pick out the point where the next most amount of light's going to hit, and then mix in a little bit more white and highlight a little bit less, a bit more white, highlight a little bit less, until I get down to where I'm just highlighting where the highest concentration of light's going to be, and it'll almost be just white for that, just with a hint of green, and then that should just bring out some of that texture, give it a little bit more depth. And then it's just a couple of finishing touches like the eyes, do the inside of the mouth and the fangs, and our Hunting Horror will be pretty close to being done at that point. go, there's some pretty simple highlighting done just to pick out those points that are going to get the most amount of light. You might have noticed that right towards the end I actually stopped dry brushing then and kind of started to feather out those edges a little bit. I had just had 1 or 2 layers there where I went a bit too much white between one layer and the next, and the contrast was a bit too much. So then just by just washing a bit of the paint off the bristles and then just having the bristles wet, then just feathering out the edges of the highlight just to blend it into the lower layer, and then just the last little like highlights on the snake's head there were just done typical sort of highlighting, just picking out the higher spots and then just feathering out those edges. But yeah, so there we are. So that step is done. I'm sort of considering whether I actually go in and just pick out the edge of the scales, do them with a dark green just to sort of bring them out a little bit more. Don't know, that might be a last minute thing that I do if I sort of think it needs it. But yeah, so I'm just going to paint the eyes, the inside of the mouth and the fangs now. So what I'm going to do with the eyes, I want them to be like a glowing sort of red. So I'm going to do just with almost a dry brush, just a red around the edge of the eyes, just so like the glow from the eyes is kind of cast onto the surface around the edge of the eyes. Then I'll paint the eye a solid red, and then I'll do like almost a white dot, sort of kind of be a pink dot well on the way to being white, just in the middle, so that it just gives it that glowing look, and then it looks like that glow is then being cast onto the snake's head around that. And then just for the inside of the mouth, it'll just be just a red mixed with a tiny bit of brown, just so it's not too bright, and then I'll mix in a little bit of white into that for the tongue, just so that's a little bit brighter, and then I'm just going to use my bone colour for the teeth, and that should pretty well finish off our hunting horror, except for something that I'm going to try with the base. But yeah, so that'll be the kind of the finishing touches, and then I'll decide if I'm going to do those, pick out the edge of those scales or not. So there's our hunting horror. I don't think I'm going to worry about picking out those scales. The detailing there is really, really fine, and I don't know if I'd be able to pick it out quite that finely, and it can sort of still be seen there all right. So I don't think it's really worth, with that level of detail, I don't think it's really sort of worth spending the time doing that. So other than sort of doing a little bit of some stuff with the base, I'm going to call hunting horror done. Base coating finished. So what I was originally thinking of doing was the same thing that I've done with Ghost, who's one of the other videos in this series, where I primed the base and then painted over that this Agrellan Earth, which I at the point of doing this, I still haven't done that with Ghost yet, but that video is there for you to be able to check out as well. The way this works is that you paint it on really thickly. Is thickly a word? You paint it on really thick, and then as it dries, it'll crack to then look like sort of dried, cracked, broken earth. And then what I'm doing with Ghost is then painting that with greys and blacks and whites to then look like stone. So I was originally thinking of doing that with the Hunting Horror, but what I'm thinking is sort of thematically, maybe just the minis that kind of resemble people. I might do that with them because they might be walking like along that stone, for example. With something like the Hunting Horror, which is more like a wild creature, it's probably going to be more like grassy, bushy kind of environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to prime part of the base, and as I prime, I'm going to leave like some uneven edges so that it gives the impression that the colouring that I do there continues beyond that point. And then I might just blend some browns and greens and things like that in just to kind of make it look like dirt and grass. And then what I'll probably do at some point down the track, I'm looking at getting some basing materials, so like those little tufts of grass and things like that, and I might stick them on there. So just for the moment, I'm just going to do that colouring. If it looks awful because the Hunting Horror is brown and green, if it just doesn't look right because it's going to be similar colours to the mini itself, then I might end up going back over it and then maybe going with the Agrellan Earth. But at the moment, I'm thinking I might keep it different to what I'm going to do with the bases of the kind of people, or at least the minis that resemble people, just to give a bit of differentiation. So yes, I'm going to prime so that when I paint, the paint's not going straight onto the plastic of the base, and then yeah, kind of create like an earthy, grassy sort of look, which will do for the moment, hopefully. And then down the track, won't be in the video, but down the track, I'll then stick on some, some of those tufts of grass that I get. So next it's just going to be priming, and then I'll have a go when it's dried properly of, blending in some of those browns and greens. So just while I'm priming the base here, I can already tell that it's probably been a good idea to not go down the Agrellan Earth road with the Hunting Horror, because it's really quite difficult to get up against the tail. Oh, come into focus. Come on, there you go. Up against the tail there underneath this part of the body, and with the basing brush and the thickness that you need to get, I reckon I would just be slopping it all over the mini. So I think, yeah, just for cleanliness and just ease of actual painting, that this has been the right road to go down. That was part of why I was thinking of doing it with the minis that more resemble people, just because they have 2 feet on the base. It's just easier to get around, and so yeah, that's ended up being a good decision. All right, so there we go. So there's a prime on there. You can see the outline that I've done because it's still wet there. So as that gets painted, by not having a really neat line, that should hopefully give the impression that it's, it continues beyond the edge of what I've painted, so that it looks like, the Hunting Horror is kind of on the ground, with some grass and different textures. Alright, so we'll come back when that's had a proper time to dry, and then, I'll be wet blending in some things for the base. So there we go, there's the base done of our Hunting Horror. So as you can see, all I did there was I just sort of stippled in some just straight green to just bring out some of the more grassy sections rather than just the dirt sections, and then a little more selective than that with stippling a mix of green and yellow, and then a final very selective touch of just straight yellow, just to sort of, so it's got that grassy effect, and then there's a couple of spots where maybe there's almost like little sort of flowers or different shades of grass growing in there. So on its own, I don't really think that's enough. I mean, it gives the effect, but probably not enough on its own. So down the track, when I get some basing materials and those tufts of grass and things like that that you can stick on, I'll put that on to finish it off. But I think for the moment, that's looking all right. So for the moment, I'm going to call Hunting Horror done, except for just our last step, and that's to varnish the Hunting Horror. So when a mini has just been painted, obviously the outermost exposed layer is the paint, and if it gets knocked or through general wear and tear just playing the game, the paint can chip off. So the idea of putting a varnish on it is to provide a clear coat across all surfaces of the mini, and that then means that the varnish is the outermost exposed layer, and it is a much more hard-wearing coat than what the paint is. So it can take being knocked and that general wear and tear a lot more than what the paint can. So it's much less likely to get chipped than just what the paint is. So I'm just going to use my matte varnish, just because there's no section of the mini that I want to be reflective or to look glossy. I will be picking up a gloss varnish at some point, just in case there are some times when I want to have some part of a mini look a bit reflective. And what I might actually do, if I had a gloss one, I might paint the eye or do a gloss varnish over the eyes, just so that they've just got that bit more reflection to them than the rest of the mini, and probably over the tongue and the open mouth there. But for the moment, the matte varnish will be fine. So I've just put a little bit in just there. It's just a couple of drops, and that should be enough to cover this mini. No watering down or anything like that, and that I'm taking from other videos that I've seen. People varnishing their minis, that's what they recommended. Don't water it down. So in later videos, I'll let you know if I agree with that or not. Tiny bit of water on the bristles as usual, and just for this I'm just using one of my old brushes. It's a size 4, just one of the brushes that I keep around that I first got, just for these sorts of jobs where it doesn't matter so much if the bristles get a little bit ruined. So yep, so just going to put our varnish on, and then come back to see how that looks. Alright, so that varnish has had plenty of time to dry, and as you can see, Hunting Horror looks no different. So that matte varnish has worked well. There's no reflection going on there. Just looks like it's been coated. Whoops. But we do now have that hard-wearing outer layer going on there. If you've already watched the Ghost video, which is the first video in this series, one thing I noticed when after the varnish had dried, was that there was a couple of tiny spots where I must have put the varnish on a little bit thick and it had pulled in some of the recesses, and you could actually see it there. Only if you went looking for it. Very, very minor, but it was something that I noticed. So as I did the varnish coat on the Hunting Horror, I made sure that I had it spread out really, really well and that it hadn't pulled anywhere. And I've had a good look over the mini and I can't see anywhere that that's happened. So yeah, just a good little tip there and something that I'll be staying mindful of. Just having a look over the model after putting a varnish on, making sure it's not pulling anywhere, because obviously the idea of the matte varnish is that it is matte. It has no reflection at all. But yeah, so now that the varnish is done, our Hunting Horror is finished. So that is Mansions of Madness Mini number 2 done. So thank you so much for spending some time to watch me paint up the hunting horror. I really do hope that you found something useful from this video that you can take away and use in your own painting, or at the very least you've simply enjoyed watching me paint. As always, please do leave a comment down below, something that you like about the videos and something that you think could be improved on. That feedback will help me to make these videos as good as possible for you guys. And yeah, please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed, so you can stay up to date with when these videos keep coming out. So with all that said, this is Matt from the Plastic Canvas signing out. Happy painting, everyone. Cheers.